So I wanted to start the Q&A by talking a little bit about your process in the pre-production and planning phase. And I wondered what key elements you focus on during the pre-production phase of a VFX heavy project.
Really, we spend a majority of the time kind of at script when we first start with script. Sometimes we just start with ideas. We spend, or I spend a great deal of time doing breakdowns, which is kind of fun because, you get to read it. You first just start by reading the whole thing, kind of just, you know, really starting to think about it. And then you go through it again and you start to break it down. And then you can really use your imagination and imagine how someone might want to shoot it. Someone might be able to help from a different department, special effects, makeup, how they might rig, say, a hanging or some kind of crazy stunt. And we start to actually go through and evaluate the needs from a visual effects standpoint. So if it's rigging removal from a hanging perspective, or where we might have the blue screens and green screens, and we keep developing it further, this breakdown in budget, while we speak with directors and showrunners, and we go and check the locations on tech recce's, on scouts, and we keep meeting with the heads of departments and going through who's kind of in charge of what. How far can someone take it practically? What's our practical limitations? And every time we have any of those meetings, I'm updating this breakdown, which incorporates our budget, our potential shot count per sequence, and every time I get a script, I go through it with usually use Duet, and in scriptation I use as well, and I keep sort of comparing the changes and looking at how that's evolving from a budgetary standpoint, schedule, who might be our vendors, where we're going to send the work, but it's a constant kind of reevaluation.
It sounds like a massive process. Are you part of the on-set scouting? And
Yes.
yeah. And what's that like?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, some days it's hard. You're kind of lost, but you're with all the heads of departments. It feels kind of like a school trip. When you're younger and and you bond more with people. Because you get to spend one-on-one time with them, and you just kind of get in and out of the bus and go to all these different locations. And then the first AD will walk through the day at that particular location and how they're going to shoot it.
And how much of a say, are you the yes/no person?
No, I'm not that person by any means. I'm more, I ask a lot of questions. I would say that's one of my biggest tools in my toolbox is asking more questions to try to find the holes, to try to find vulnerabilities, to try to, by asking certain questions, you may get more information. It may lead to another kind of question that you are able to help to define, are we looking this way? How many times will we look this way? Where's an actor going to stand if an actor is at the end of the dock and we're replacing, all of the water in a little lake, to be, a fjord and ships in the harbor. How vulnerable are we? How expensive are those shots per shot? I might make suggestions. Could we go out in the dock and say, kind of a quick goodbye and kind of see it, and then come back onto the shore and then kind of look in the other direction where we're less vulnerable to heavy visual effects. So sometimes are those kinds of suggestions, or how are we dressing a certain location? How far can SFX get us? Can they do a mold of a head? We'll ask a lot of questions, and then we can kind of subtract from what we imagined.
It's a really creative role, actually, and one that I imagine is presented with many challenges. Could you kind of talk us through how you prepare for the potential challenges that you might face on set with VFX?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it is I would say relationships and allies. There's a tenaciousness about it. Sometimes you have to kind of, go around something might be not working in your favor. Say we're doing something that needs demodernization. So we're doing something for Vikings, and we're shooting in your backyard right now. You think of all the things that are not the right year. So you will ask set deck if they can kind of fix something, and maybe they can, or maybe they can't. It could be raking tire tracks. It could be moving the camera slightly so we're not showing a telephone pole or something, and sometimes it kind of goes your way and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you'll have to, get people that can kind of assist with communicating in a different way, kind of pushing back and saying, no, this is going to hit them budgetarily. Let's try and help their department. Getting crew and GAC out of the way, things like that. Sometimes, getting the AD to be a bit more supportive, giving them a bit more time sometimes to clear an area when they're turning around, when they're turning the cameras around and facing the other direction for the other cast member. Sometimes you have directors that just hold their cameras and rip around, and you don't have a choice. And you kind of have to go with those things. Sometimes, that's not, you're not going to win that one. So you have to pick and choose your battles and be smart about where you can kind of gain some traction or reduce a bit in your budget, or maybe it'll fit and you feel good about it and kind of have to let it go. You can't fight everything.
No. Well, could you? It's such an interesting field, and I think one that not many people kind of get a peek into. Could you describe a typical day on set for yourself, like a VFX producer, and what are your primary responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, typical is a funny word because nothing feels very typical.
Everyone says that. And
locations are always so varied.
Yeah.
You can be, inside, you can be outside, you can be somewhere clean or dirty, or, up against the elements in a snowstorm, or out in a boat or at sea. I mean, you can just keep naming them. So typical doesn't necessarily, it's always more of being agile and being able to pivot. And, it's more of a constant reprioritizing. But really, I mean, I'm a little more, I'm lucky in the sense that I can kind of flirt in a bit. So I'll, come at call time. I don't have to necessarily be there at call time, but I try. And sometimes there's other meetings that I might go to in the morning. But really, we're checking in on the team. The breakdowns that I was talking about ahead of earlier were what our set supervisors work towards. So they basically have the map of the day. So that scene is broken down. How many shots we're expecting of gore? How many shots we're expecting of cleanup? Matte paintings for the background. We've already analyzed all of that to such a degree and as a constant that's really tight when they start with it. So they'll kind of give me an update. We get an update at the end of the day as well, but they'll start off by, so and so has a cold sore, or or the wig isn't fitting right, and there's they've had a problem with a costume. The bottom of the boots we painted, but now they're orange. The 3 boats didn't show up. You're 2 boats shy, but we said where'd
they go?
Yeah, and maybe we had that for part of a massive scene where we were pulling something down, and it doesn't even make sense anymore the way that and they're rethinking it. And VFX will put in a few boats. Whoa, that's that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So when certain things come up, you go, oh yeah, we'll take care of that. Yeah, you go, wait, what? So some of those you kind of have to start a paper trail and let some folks know that this has happened. Sometimes out of our control. Sometimes there is somebody that maybe needs to learn a lesson, but we try to do that in a nice way and communicate. I'd say a lot of my job is communication, checking on my crew. Life continues as the show does. Sometimes something's come up and we might need to help with something, get them more support, or maybe some gear has an issue. There's so many variables, but for the most part, I'd say I kind of am checking in to see if there's any high priority items. We just start watching the day. We're at our own sort of video village, and we're watching the screen and seeing what's going to come up for visual effects. And then we track that against my original breakdown. And as each week goes by, which is an evening update, not globally, just to each other. And then we accumulate all of that and I'll send out a status of the week and how it's, how it's tracking against what we had planned budgetarily and so forth.
And so you have like on-set and then like a, I guess, in studio or post-production team. How do you coordinate between the on-set crew and the post-production team just to ensure that seamless execution?
Well, we're really we spend a lot of energy setting up our teams and the right people for the right caliber. Some people wear a few hats. We kind of, I'm sure you're aware that there's kind of people kind of coordinators, and there's more tech coordinators. So it's kind of a balance of those individuals. So usually for my on-set coordinator, I will have someone more tech driven, to be honest. And that data will go to the vendor or where we've designated. It may just go to a holding source until we are ready to allocate it to a vendor. But often if we already know who the vendor is for that sequence, that will be delivered regularly, all of the data to them. So that's, a lot of tracking and a lot of data from all of our wranglers. And, that's really an important component, but often they'll wear multiple hats. Like my last coordinator would also do our LiDAR scanning. He could also use Unreal at he's an animator.
Wow.
So he knew file structures. He could also be a data wrangler. When we needed a third person out there or a witness cam, he could go out and do those things. So often it's more hats. We started a data wrangling program on our last show that I spearheaded, which was neat. And they weren't necessarily people from, they were maybe an animator. We had another animator. They know file names, they know cameras because of layouts and those kinds of factors. So some of the knowledge from, say, an Animal Logic, where, Bree and I know each other from, some of those layout days kind of come into effect, even just, working in visual effects on set.
Do you find that you have more to do with the on-set crew than, I guess, the post crew?
When I was working vendor side, obviously I would just, I came up on that, and then I moved to vendor and I worked my way up that way, and then I came back to set. So now I will, award the work to vendors. Still have a small team, maybe half a dozen folks, but say if I was producing a Maleficent vendor side, I may have 100 artists. So it really changes significantly, but because I've done both, I don't think a lot of people have the chance to do that. And because I've worked in other departments like art department or production office or locations, I kind of have a different understanding of set. It's definitely its own animal for sure. It's you definitely have to be light on your feet, agile to kind of manage the different locations and the different kind of circumstances that you come up into.